I'm Bo Johnson. Freedom. Freedom is. Freedom is the first condition of the human soul, the natural possession of every man and woman created in the image of God. Freedom is the right to act from reason and conscience, to choose good over evil, and to govern one's own life without coercion from another. John Locke called it, quote, "a liberty to follow my own will in all things, where the rule prescribes not, and not to be subject to the inconstant, uncertain, arbitrary will of another man," end quote. Freedom is not a privilege distributed by rulers. It is the birthright of the ruled. It predates kings, congresses, and courts. It exists before institutions and survives after empires fall. Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1776, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights," end quote. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In those words, the world first heard that law does not create freedom. Law must recognize it. Freedom is the sphere of personal sovereignty. Liberty is the exercise within just boundaries. Freedom is origin, liberty is order. Freedom is the seed, liberty the cultivated field. James Madison warned, quote, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary," end quote. But because men are not angels, a lawful government is required, not to grant liberty, but to keep men from violating it. Thus, liberty is freedom disciplined by conscience and guarded by law. John Adams said, quote, "A republic is an empire of laws and not of men," end quote. When law itself conforms to truth, it protects freedom. When law becomes the tool of power, it destroys it. President Calvin Coolidge reminded us, quote, "Men do not make laws. They do but discover them. Laws must rest on the eternal foundation of righteousness," end quote. To govern lawfully is to conform human will to that eternal order. Freedom, therefore, is not the license to do as one pleases. It is the liberty to do as one ought. It is not chaos, but conscience. It is not rebellion, but rightful self-command. Under natural law, every man holds three great estates: life, liberty, and property. His own person, his power to act, and the fruits of his labor. To tax his labor unjustly, to license his breath, to regulate his conscience. These are acts not of law, but of dominion. Law must restrain evil. It may not purchase virtue. In the early republic, liberty meant the people's mastery over government. Today, it is often spoken of as government's permission for the people. That inversion is the crisis of our age. When permission replaces possession, the free become tenants on their own inheritance. Patrick Henry cried out, quote, "Give me liberty or give me death," end quote. He did this not as a rebel, but as a man who understood that without liberty, life itself is servitude. Frederick Douglass echoed him a century later, quote, "The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress," end quote. Freedom endures only where man refuses to yield it. Freedom is knowledge of one's own authority under God. Liberty is the practice of that authority in harmony with others. Together they form the moral geometry of a republic, the divine order of self-government. And when a people remember this order, when they speak again the language of lawful right and natural duty, the republic breathes. May we therefore teach our children that freedom is a sacred trust, liberty its daily stewardship, and government its humble servant. For when truth reigns supreme, freedom reigns supreme as well.